The meat of today's episode runs on a little longer than usual, and we have Fuck Konami news coming up. So let's keep this bit short and sweet. None of the usual faffing about and messing around. Straight to business. That business being disclosure. I talk about We Happy Few a fair bit in today's episode, and whenever I talk about a game I have involvement with, I need to disclose that I have involvement with it. You see? Pro Syndicate and Team Martin, that's how you do that. So just to let you know, for those of you who may not know already, I contribute some voice stuff, some voice acting, if you can call what I do acting, to We Happy Few. It's not actually in the currently launched version on, well, not launched, on early access. That's coming in a future update, if they still use it after this episode, because I've been really critical of the game lately, and yeah. Sorry about that, but not really sorry, because that's my job. But let's crack on with it. As I say, straight to business, we gotta go. Go! Also, this is the mask that I wear when I fuck! In theory, a game about surviving a hostile territory with limited resources is tantalising. I love the idea of foraging for food, of maintaining an adequate supply of water, of fighting off potential disease and lingering injury in a video game, not in real life. I'm too fat to do any of that. The concept of a survival game should be exciting, a challenge of one's wits, preparedness, and ability to remain self-sufficient while completing whatever overarching goals lie ahead. Unfortunately, as with so many things in this perpetually problem-filled game industry, survival games are rarely exciting when put into actual practice. In fact, the sadly predictable ubiquity of them following a few noteworthy successes has only caused a significant amount of players to roll their eyes every time they hear the phrase survival elements. A big problem with survival games these days is that they've allowed themselves to become way too codified. Game development, while sometimes a brimming hub of imagination, can often be quite the opposite, and once one game stumbled upon a winning formula, it doesn't take long for dozens of other ones to follow suit. Like MMOs before them, survival games have restricted the vast potential they once presented by following a rigid pattern set out by the most popular examples. This runs particularly counter to a game about surviving deadly, unknown environments, since the mystery and discovery that should be part of such games has been replaced by a strict set of expected rules. Basically, we know we'll be thrown into some sort of procedurally generated world with the same old crafting recipes, the same old need to run around picking up random shit off the floor, and the same old hunger, thirst, and sleep meters governing our survivability. Hardly a venture into the unknown. It's those meters, in particular, that really kill the fun of a survival game, since too few game developers have actually mastered the art of making them anything more than perpetual distractions that require constant repetitive actions to maintain. A prime recent example of just how badly these survival meters can kill a game's mood is the recently purchasable, I mean, you can't really say launched, can you? The recently purchasable We Happy Few. Compulsion Games' promising adventure set in a menacing 60s dystopia is set up like many other survival games on the market. Though its premise is definitely original, and its yet to be included story mode could be something quite special indeed, the current incarnation of the game, which is in early access, is absolutely dominated by an endless need to keep the protagonist's thirst quenched, belly filled, and body rested. Compulsion is currently focusing its first update on giving these meters a severe rebalance, but the version they launched with, sorry, not launched, the game they blaunched with, early access has really fucked what we say about games. Blaunched. Games that are on early access have been blaunched. Yeah. So the game that they blaunched with perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with survival games. It's a golden pain in my perfectly adequate cock to balance 3 different meters to the point of near exclusivity, and that doesn't even include the stamina meter. We Happy Few doesn't so much challenge players to think ahead as it does harass them constantly. You are feeling thirsty, you are feeling hungry, you are feeling tired over and over again ad fucking nauseum. You'll drink water and refill your thirst meter only to have the
game bug you about being thirsty a minute later. You'll eat food and guzzle liquid, but soon need sleep and wake up empty and parched once more. A vicious bloody cycle of it. As you desperately try to complete objectives before you're sleepy again, most of which involve gathering randomly generated crafting materials, because of course they do, you'll be sidetracked over and over again by the game tugging on your sleeve, bothering you unceasingly about your protagonist's needs. But that's not all. Naturally, the game's world is full of added concerns that will pile even more distracting responsibilities onto the player. Eating the rotting food that populates We Happy Few's world has a good chance to cause food poisoning, which will require pills to cure, or otherwise serve as an added drain on one's survival meters. Then there's plague, which is basically a terminal illness unless you're lucky enough to find or craft the right treatment and administer it in time. And then there's the good old-fashioned bleeding, which is a staple of these games. It drains your health and requires bandages to fix. Bandages that can, obviously, cause infection if you don't happen to have clean ones, which will in turn create even more hurdles and hoops to navigate. And simply put, that's not fun. It's not fucking fun to be constantly hassled and harangued by a game you're trying to play, to abandon tasks when you're right in the middle of them because you might suddenly die of thirst, or you really need to find somewhere to sleep. I mean, Christ, there's enough harassment going on around video games, we really don't need it going on in them. We Happy Few is but a recent example, and hopefully compulsion will redress the balance in a way that makes these elements challenges rather than tiresome tests of patience. But you can find loads of games doing similar things if you dig around on Steam, especially early access, where survival games seem to love hanging out the most. Games governed by meters upon meters, where you feel like those lauded survival elements aren't so much an interesting gameplay challenge as they are a leash tightening ever more around one's neck. You spend your time attending to the needs of a protagonist that is always hungry, always thirsty, always tired, always sick, always wants something that stops you playing the video games. You know what else is always hungry, always thirsty, always tired, always sick, and stops you playing the video games? Babies! Like this one. Seriously though, that's what you're doing. You're babysitting, not surviving. You're looking after a helpless resource drain that will never, ever be satisfied and constantly hinders your plans with its illimitable demands. And game developers need to start understanding that it's not fucking entertainment. Like I said, I enjoy the idea of survival games, of managing resources and navigating an interactive wilderness full of dangers that require preparation, wit, and a measure of luck. I don't want them to go away. But the genre for survival has indeed become a genre, or at least a subgenre by now, really needs to fix its shit. The obvious and easiest way to deal with the problem is simply to loosen the rope. This is something We Happy Few is redressing, thankfully, by toning down the harshness of the hunger, thirst and sleep meters, making in-game days longer, and increasing durability on tools and weapons. Oh yeah! Fuck, I never even mentioned that, did I? For God's sake, don't put weapons and tools in your game that break after a minute of cocking use, yeah? Especially if I have to spend resources making them. Again, just stop before you do it, and ask yourself, before you give me a spear that can maybe kill 2 enemies before it snaps, how is this fun? How does this make my game more enjoyable? How will my players think this is a good idea? If you can't actually answer those questions, then don't give me a spear that can maybe kill 2 enemies before it fucking snaps. You shouldn't need player feedback to realise this is an issue. Just keep asking those questions I've provided you. Ask them for everything you put in your game. Ask those questions more than your games ask me to find some fucking water. Anyway, that's an easy fix, and my point is, because I really don't want compulsion to think I'm picking on them, the poor sods, I'm genuinely happy they're listening to feedback on this one, and that We Happy Few will stop, fingers crossed, being a big digital baby. Also, a lot of the more popular survival games have nailed this already. Rust and Ark aren't too bad about it at all. Ark also lets you pick up dinosaur shit, so it's always a good game to learn from. Another good way to fix these issues, and again it's a fix that really ain't dramatic, is to allow for more customization of a game's survival elements. If a player wants to test themselves and go full out survival mode, then I absolutely encourage their masochism even if I don't really get it. But one of the great things things about Don't Starve, itself a cult hit survival game, is that it allows the player's agency in just how harsh a climate they fancy tackling. Don't Starve's world customization options are fantastic, allowing the player to tweak anything from the availability of resources, to the length of seasons, to the regularity of rainfall and population of monsters. This is a great way to allow players to enjoy the kind of survival experience they want, and to find a nice balance between challenging and simply being a pestering pain in the arse. There's one other really promising way to improve survival games, though this one is definitely more involved. Have some fucking original ideas of your own. It's all very well to slap a thirst meter and some crafting in your randomised patch of grass and say you made a survival game, but you are in essence doing what 1,000 World of Warcraft wannabes did when they ignored the scope and flexibility of massive multiplayer gaming to simply suck Blizzard's gravy and do everything WoW did without a single autonomous thought. There's more to surviving than drinking water and making bandages out of linen or leaves or whatever you've littered your wasteland with. It's quite possible to have a survival game with the other It's quite possible to have a survival game with other requirements and have those requirements work well together. State of Decay is a good example. It is in its own way a survival game about managing the needs of a group rather than an individual. Your goal is to hunt for food and supplies and to build things that keep your community healthy, happy and fed. But these elements are blended into the gameplay rather than actively used to fight against the gameplay. You strike out from the safety of your base to gather these supplies with ample opportunity to plan a day's objective ahead of time. Your next in-game day may be about looking for food specifically, or acquiring weapons, or completing one of the story missions. Whatever it is, you set the goal ahead of time. And while there are unforeseen dangers that can occur and throw you off track, you're not sidelined endlessly. The sidetracks are reserved as nasty surprises, not aggravating constants. Then there's a game like This War of Mine, which takes the community survival aspect of State of Decay and turns it into something more oppressive, morbid, and distressing. Now, it actually does have some common traits of a regular survival game. You deal with tiredness, hunger, crafting, but it breaks its gameplay into distinct parts. You have a crafting phase, a resource collecting phase, downtime, opportunities to plan, random events, and it's actually good enough at crafting an oppressive atmosphere to where the demands of the protagonists actually work in its favour, creating a depressing tone where you really just see how long you can hold out before you die rather than hope to survive. It's a rare thing to turn the negatives of the genre into positives, but through the right tone, atmosphere, and careful structuring of gameplay, This War of Mine managed to make it evocative and morbidly gripping rather than just plain annoying. Then there's Dead Age, another early access contender, which throws role-playing and choose-your-own-adventure gameplay into the mix. Look at this shit. Here's a survival game that's also a turn-based RPG.
Here's a TV that looks like an apple.
Just a simple thing like that turns the whole thing on its head and doesn't bother you with constant thirsty boy meters. And of course, we can look to another survival genre to see how that word doesn't just mean staving off thirst. Survival horror games owned the term long before Rust, Ark or DayZ turned up, and they made it about learning when to pick your battles, when to run away, when to use limited healing items, and when to spend precious ammunition. They were survival games in their own right, still are, and they're about managing your supplies, enduring harsh environments and outwitting overpowering forces without needing a bunch of different coloured bars whining about how hungry you are. There are examples out there already of how to do things differently, and there are likely tons of ways to make a survival game without falling back on what's safe and done and ultimately fucking exasperating, ways that haven't been discovered yet. I'm not a game designer. It's not my responsibility to come up with them, though I could probably pull a bunch of them out my arse if someone wants to give me money to do their job for them. Point is, there are now roughly 8 billion procedurally generated games in which you get hungry, and the thrill of surviving an unknown wilderness kind of disappears once players know everything about your wilderness before they even play the fucking thing. Also, Ark Survival Evolved? Nobody knows why we keep getting hot. Even the ones who claim they know are fucking lying. We sit in the water for hours, and we're still fucking hot. No one knows why we're hot. Why am I hot?
And that's another riveting episode of the Jimquisition for you all to enjoy. I hope you did enjoy it. As I say, I really like the idea of survival games. I just really want them to tone some of their shit down and maybe be a bit more original and actually bring that idea of spontaneity and procedural generation to the genre of survival, which, I mean, that's the big irony. They talk about procedural generation as if something unexpected could occur, but it's always the same old shit. Procedural generation is itself, because they don't want things to be so random as to be full of bugs or break, they do have to follow very strict rules. So it's not really as dynamic as it would otherwise be. In fact, scripted stuff could often be more surprising because they get to 100% control what happens. Okay, it's only surprising once, but it's often more surprising than, oh look, a monster's here when the other day it was over there. But it's still the same monster and it's still doing the same shit. You know? Maybe look into that. You know? I feel like a lot of these games need some scripted stuff happening within the random stuff. A lot of these developers seem to set it and forget it. Like, here's our random element, bush, done, hands off. No. Go in there and actually make sure some of that stuff does follow a pattern, because, again, the irony is it will be more surprising, because you can actually script things to surprise us, rather than just hope the RNG does the job for you. At least that's what I think anyway. I'm not a game developer, I'm just God's chosen representative on Earth. Speaking of which, thank God for me! And the mask that I wear when I fuck! Time now for some Fuck Konami news. That's all the news that's fit to make you say Fuck Konami. Konami recently released its financial reports, and it revealed that revenue was down. Boo-hoo! But its profits were up. Yay! The interesting thing to note here is exactly what helped to drive those profits. You see, pachinko stuff's down. They actually took a hit to their pachinko division, which really does help contextualise their recent pledges to win back our trust, because it turns out that a big reason why the profits were up was the digital arena. We're talking console games, we're talking mobile games, we're talking more traditional game shit. One of the biggest contributors to this was Metal Gear Solid 5, which sold for 49.2 million units, which is certainly nothing to sneeze at. Well done, by the way, Konami, on getting rid of the guy who wrote and directed and created and headed up the studio that made that game. Well done. Well done, you. Accompanying this news, we have more word from Ben, the representative of Konami who's been posting on Reddit and defending the company. Recently, Ben said that, well, Konami never said that they were ditching console gaming. They never said they were going to stop doing traditional games, and the press misreported it because it got them clicks, and they ignored all the statements from executives that said they were still committed. I didn't ignore them. I certainly didn't ignore them. In fact, I think I've talked about it before and poured scorn on what I considered insincere, bullshitty, cynical statements. You see, because it wasn't the things Konami were saying that made me consider that the company didn't give a shit about anything anymore. It was the company's actions. You know, Ben. The shit that matters. The shit that actually matters. You know, I'm talking about years of mishandling properties, terrible PR, not even sending out press releases when games are released, the producer of a particular game being unable to find his game in North America when he came over to visit. We're talking the mishandling of the Silent Hill franchise, the cancellation of PT, the treatment of Kojima, of course, the turning of popular beloved franchises like Silent Hill, Castlevania, Metal Gear Solid into pachinko machines, the terrible, embarrassing, cringeworthy, pathetic display it had at E3 this year. The fact that its financial reports had nothing to tell us about any upcoming game releases, and we only have these vague allusions as to what may be in store for franchises like Silent Hill and Metal Gear Solid and all that stuff. And there are hints in the financial reports that they're actually looking at leveraging their popular IPs for the pachinko stuff more. So that's the shit that concerns me and many other people, Ben. It's not what Konami says, because I don't give a halfpenny shit about the words that spill from the lips of Konami's mouthpieces. No company's mouthpieces say things that are worth jack jizz. You feel me? Actions. Stop talking and do. Do. Announce a new game. Okay? You only had Metal Gear Solid 5. What else you got? Nothing but weak, limp promises about, oh, we're still committed to doing this, we're still committed to the console. I don't care what you're committed to. I don't care what you're committed to. What have you got? What have you actually got, Ben and friends? I'm waiting. We're all waiting. Okay? Until then, we're just going to keep saying, fuck Konami. And we'll probably keep saying it afterwards, when you do show something, because Konami is Konami, and Konami is the worst, and I'm sure Konami, of all companies, will find a way to fuck up whatever it does next, because that's the one thing Konami is committed to doing.